Welcome to Card Central 365, powered by Gray Bar here on STL Sports Central. All content provided by DraftKings. The crown is yours. He's Brenden Schaeffer. I'm Stefan, Caray. Let's just lay out the facts here real quick. The Mets are in a tailspin. The Cardinals have now given the Rockies 12.5% of their total wins in their season. They have been one of the worst teams in baseball history by record in 2025. This is really as frustrating of an outcome as you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, the way the Cardinals let the series slip away against Colorado, knowing that the same thing happened when they played them out in Denver. You mentioned the 12.5%. I think it's like 25% of Colorado's series wins on the season have come against the Cardinals. And yeah, we've talked all year about Colorado being like the worst team in Major League history. Maybe it's the Cardinals that save them from being that, because they might end up, inching past what last year's White Sox did. There's still a chance of that. And if they do, it'll be by virtue of how the Cardinals let them win 4 games. So all those happy thoughts about, hey, you played some really good baseball against the Dodgers. You beat the Cubs 2 out of 3. Hey, Yankees are coming to town. Just bridge the gap. Bridge the gap between the competitive series that you have and beat up on a bad team. Cardinals couldn't do it. They let it slip away last night, couldn't score a run in game 2. And now we're sitting here on an off day going, well, now what? Because we had sort of suckered ourselves back into thinking about, hey, what about the playoffs? And now after the last 2 nights, I just don't see how you can necessarily be doing that. So we're kind of stuck here thinking about what's next for the Cardinals.
Well, and they currently sit 4 games back, and that's even more frustrating, right? I'm not saying you want to see them 6 games back or 7 games back. You always want them to be in the mix, but it reminds you of what could have been. You sweep the Rockies ahead of the Yankees coming into town. Suddenly, you're 2 games back, maybe 1 game back if things happen a little bit differently in New York, who, again, are in a complete tailspin. They have been one of the worst teams in baseball since the All-Star break. So there is a lane to get back into this if you're a Cardinals fan, if you are in that clubhouse. But you have to do it against the teams like the Rockies. You have to. And again, I'm not in that clubhouse. I am not one of those players. I cannot profess to know what it is like to be a Major League Baseball player on the day-to-day. But there really is no arguing the point that that's maybe not a sweep that you have to get, but you have to win one of those 2 series, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to go 4 out of 6 for sure, right, against Colorado, and they go 2 out of 6. And I don't know if the Cardinals are going to be, at the end of the season, 2 games short of a playoff spot, but it could end up being very close to that margin. I mean, they're a 500 team today. We don't know what's going to happen the rest of the way, but it feels like a fool's errand to continue to say, hey, playoffs are 4 games back, like when we're watching what we're watching on the field. And here's the other part of this. I would understand some pushback where you say, okay, let's break it down. Second game of the Rockies series, Matt Pauley had the stat. 15 of the 17 hardest hit balls of the game were from Cardinals, right? They just didn't find holes. They found gloves instead, and you lose a hard luck game. All right. Once in a while, Stefan, you can lose a hard luck game. I don't think it's unfair to say in 2025, you maybe can't lose hard luck games to the Rockies, but if you do it, you can't do it twice. And so, I understand you traded Helsley, you traded Maton, you traded Matz, and so your bullpen looks different. But we had just gotten done praising the bullpen for the way that it has coalesced in the aftermath of the trade deadline. But then last night, Leahy gives up a run. O'Brien comes in a little shaky, but got through. Jojo Romero gives up the home run that cost you the game. Look, those guys have been good, and they're allowed a bad day here and there. It can't coalesce to be all of y'all having the bad day against the Rockies in game 3 when you got to get a series win. So there are, individual moments you can point to from those games and say, oh, that's baseball. It happens. That you don't get the luxury of saying that for this series against this team if you want to be a playoff contender. And look, is it mathematically impossible now? No. But spiritually, it does feel kind of impossible. And it'll take all that much more on the other side. Instead of having to go continue, hey, win a series against the Yankees, continue to grind them out like you did against the Cubs and the Dodgers. Now you got to sweep the Yankees. Now you got to sweep other teams that it's not easy to sweep. The schedule gets a little bit tougher as you round out August. And so, yeah, you just can't realistically believe that this is the path that they're heading on. Maybe they'll surprise us, Stefan, but right now as we're operating here, I just cannot get, and I think Cardinals fans feel the same, emotionally into a place where it's like, hey, you never know, 4 games. I don't want to know about the 4 games. I want to know how many games above 500 the Cardinals are, because that tells me more about what kind of team that they actually are underneath it all.
I love that approach, Brenden. And to your point, I think hard hit rate, I think what you were talking about earlier is important in the development of these young players. But I come from an old-fashioned baseball family. Old man staring at a cloud raising me, I guess, would be a way that a lot of the young fans in baseball would say. But here's been my perception of hard hit rate, of exit velo, of WOBA, expected batting average. These analytics are trying to put lipstick on a pig. And the way that I look at it is this, is if you go up to a hitter and you show them 10 statistics, which ones do you think they're going to pick if they have a choice? The ones that are going to make them look the best, right? If you have an expected batting average of 350, but you're hitting 210, at some point you've got to ask the question, right? People hit the same types of ground balls. They hit the same type of fly balls. I don't care about what you're expected to do. I care about what happens in the game. And in the game, you've got to find ways to hit. Here are the things that I'm looking at. I'm looking at hitting with runners in scoring position. That was really bad against the Rockies. I'm looking at the progression of the middle of the order. We started to see a little bit more power. That's a positive. Pitching late has not been an issue for the Cardinals by and large this season. It was late against the Rockies. So it's not a meltdown moment, but all of the silver linings of, oh, well, the expected batting average was good on this swing, or, oh, this ball was hit really hard. It didn't contribute to anything. It didn't amount to any runs. So, I mean, I think that we can go around in circles and say that, hey, this is a really good thing for the Cardinals that they're doing this. And on one hand, it is. But against a team like the Rockies, is that really where you want to hang your hat? That's not where I want to hang mine.
No, and it's not time for a helicopter, 10,000-foot view of the situation. When you're facing the Rockies and your previous proof of concept was like good series against the Dodgers, bad game from Michaelis that cost you, good series against the Cubs, had a bad middle game start that cost you, so you couldn't sweep those series. But you played some really good baseball over the course of a week. And look, game 1 against the Rockies, they won it, but only because Donnie comes off the bench to play hero. They didn't do enough offensively, and it's just not a tip your cap pitching staff. I'm sorry. But when you're facing Kyle Freeland, you're facing Austin Gomber, they got to Gomber. Good on them for that. But the bullpen's not a tip your cap bullpen. You can't just say, well, they got some good arms down there. All these guys are professionals. They're all getting paid the same. The Rockies, relative to the league, do not have some good arms down there. They don't. They have the arms that you're supposed to be able to get because all the other teams in the league are doing it. And so when you take this sort of, hey, here's the helicopter view, they're hitting the ball hard, baseball happened to them tonight. Totally true. But like the body of work to this point has added up to something that demonstrates you weren't allowed to have that happen to you and have it be the excuse for a loss in this particular series. You haven't afforded yourselves that luxury. And it's okay. Like, world's not going to stop spinning when the Cardinals go 81-81 this year. But I love what Paul Goldschmidt said back when he was with the team. I think it was 2023 where he gave the quote, Cardinals were struggling early. And it was just another one of those days where you're like, oh, let's ask Goldie because he's kind of the veteran leader on the team. How's the team handling this? And at a certain point, he comes out and says, look, we think we're a good baseball team. But the thing about baseball is it's a fair game. You play 162 games, you play for 6 months, you're going to find out. The record's going to tell you what kind of team you actually were. We can think within these walls that we're a good team. Baseball's a fair game. It'll let you know at the end what you were for that season. And that season, the Cardinals were not nearly enough, right? Ended up having to sell at the deadline. They weren't a very good team. We look at this year, they sold at the deadline. They weren't a bad team, but they're a middling team. And there's only so many times you can say, you know what, if not for those 6 or 7 games where luck went against us, which it's going to do for all 30 teams, right? You're going to have those games where you hit the ball hard and it doesn't pan out. But you play for 6 months, you play for 162 games, you'll know what kind of team you were. And then ideally, if it doesn't end up resulting in the end result that you want, if you're the St. Louis Cardinals, front office comes in and says, we're going to make changes based on that. We're going to, at a certain point, not continue to react to only here's what should have happened. Frankly, what should be happening is the Cardinals should be a handful of games below 500. If you look at run differential, if you look at a number of the expected stats from that perspective. And once again, they're hanging right there around 500. I believe that to be a tribute to what Ollie Marmol has done as manager, what the coaching staff has been able to get out of these guys. But then that would say, okay, the true reflection of the talent of the 26-man roster is maybe lower than what the record is. And if that's the case, that's where the front office will have to come in and make tweaks, make changes. I don't think it's an easy task to know exactly where to make those tweaks and changes. But I think it's indisputable at this point that if the Cardinals, kind of go 500 again this year when they were expected to be a little bit below that. And so this is not drastically outside the bounds of what could have happened for the season. But that's not a reason to just continue to say, hey, status quo, we're doing fine. So it'd be interesting to see how the season finishes out, how that impacts maybe what Chaim Bloom is looking at going into the offseason with some of these runway candidates and how the runway may morph or shift for next year. And then you got to go from there. But gosh, you're right. It's a testament to what could have been when you come into that second game of the Rockies series, a couple of games above 500, watching what's happening with the New York Mets. Should be 2 games below 500 right now because, yeah, you can't say, oh, it should be an easy sweep. That's a hard thing to do in baseball. I'll make an exception for this Rockies team, though. You got to be able to win the season series against that team. And Cardinals not only were unable to do that, they couldn't find a split. They end up losing 4 of 6, and they're where they are as a result.
Well, this is Card Central 365, powered by Graybar, your distributor for electrical and data needs. He's Brenden Schaeffer. I'm Stefan Caray. And one thing that we, I think, lightly touched on, Cardinals take 2 out of 3 from the Dodgers. They take 2 out of 3 from the Cubs. You come back and you have the Rockies as the middle of a long homestand. That's the thing that really, really makes me wonder is, again, you can't know that every series is a trap series, right? But the Rockies have been a trap for them already once this season. And do you feel like feet were taken off the gas pedal a little bit? This is a young team that, hey, you had 2 really tough opponents in the Dodgers and Cubs. Oh, the Rockies are going to come into town. We're going to relax a little bit. Gosh,
I hope that's not what happened. And look, I'm sure if you asked coaching staff and the manager and the players, they would probably say, no, that's not the way that this goes. We're going to put everything into every single game that we have. And, it's something that you can't afford to have happen. I can't say I've identified anything over the past 2 games watching it play out that was the case. But does there come a point in a game where you go, oh, man, 11 of the 14 hard hit balls that we've had, haven't found a hole. And then that's the part where somewhere in the corners of your mind, you're like, we might lose today. And you kind of allow that to infiltrate. Those are the things that you may not notice. I don't call it like taking foot off the gas pedal or necessarily, oh, they're not trying, they don't want to win. That's an implication that fans can bring up that I don't agree with.
No,
but can you say
suggesting that this was a Rockies team after 2 tough opponents where if you could put your feet up and coast a little bit,
yeah,
of course you're still trying to win, but you're less concerned about them than you were, say, the Cubs and Dodgers.
Yeah, was the preparation any different? Was the mentality any different coming into the series rather than I think it's more like you get down 3-0 in a game and you're like, what happened? Where that's where you go, man, we're supposed to beat these guys. In the darkest corners of your minds, does that creep in? There's a possibility that does. Yesterday is the frustrating part, though. It's almost the inverse of that, where it's like 5-2, we're beating the Rockies, we're doing what we're supposed to, and then you don't tack on against the Colorado bullpen. I don't know the statistics of what the MLB, what the team stats are when it comes to the Rockies and their bullpen, but I'm going to guess it's not top of the league. I'm going to guess that their relief corps is a relief corps that teams have been able to, generally speaking, do some damage against. And so it's like, we did our job. And again, I'm not speaking to the individual at bats. I'm not saying I could go in and point out, oh, he gave this at bat away. He gave that. Not necessarily saying that, but like you look at the body of work of what the rest of that game was. Yeah, Colorado, 5.43. That's their bullpen ERA. It's 29th in baseball. They got 5 runs against Austin Gomber. They had a 5-2 lead, at least in like the narrative of a game. Maybe it doesn't match reality, but you're up 5-2. You're thinking, we got this in the bag. And are you scrapping and clawing as though the game's tied or you're down by 1? Because maybe that offense could have used an extra run, but they were probably figuring bullpen's not going to falter. It's been so good recently. And it kind of snuck up on them. It's like, it's 5-3. That's fine. Still winning. That's 5 we're down 6-5. And then your goose is cooked. So yeah, I think coming into the series, you could have said, we're a team that just beat the Cubs and the Dodgers. We're going to handle the Rockies. And then the vibes after game 1 are like, we didn't really deserve to win this game, but we did. We got away with this one, and now we're going to roll. And they didn't score the next day, Stefan. And so that, you're careful with criticizing effort. I am anyway. But how do you do that? How do you go and lose to that team, not score a run, the Rockies had like a 200 game streak where they didn't shut anybody out. Now they've done it to the Cardinals twice in 3 weeks or whatever it's been. Again, whatever the implication, we don't have to make an implication, but the results speak for themselves. And those are not good results.
Right. And in no way am I criticizing the preparation or the concern, because you know that Brant Brown, that Stubby Clapp, that Ollie Marmol, that Pop Warner, all those guys are getting them well prepared. But this is also a youth aspect of this team. And we'll touch on that a little bit more after we talk a little bit about DraftKings. Nothing beats relaxing on a hot summer day and watching baseball. And the simplest way to get in on the action is to download the Pick Six app from DraftKings. It's crazy simple. Just pick more or less on the stats for 2 or more of your favorite players, and boom, you're in the mix for big cash prizes. Pick Six available right here in Missouri. Don't miss out on the fun. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick Six. And right now, new customers can get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5. Download the DraftKings Pick Six app now and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to get $25 in bonus picks with their first deposit of $5. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick Six from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick Six credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promo.
All right, welcome back to Card Central 365. Just taking a look at this Rockies pitching staff. Your 3 best pitchers, Vodnik, Darnell, and Herget, all have a 4 or below ERA. Everybody else has above a 4. So they've got a couple of guys in the bullpen that can go and get it done a little bit. And yes, Busch Stadium is a much easier place to pitch than Coors Field. But the youth of this team, I think it was something that we have discussed a little bit. It's going to be growing pains. And I think with the criticism that comes from this group, we also need to understand that this is a learning period for a lot of these guys that weren't getting everyday playing time. Where it is frustrating is it wasn't like there was a lack of opportunities to score in these games. There were plenty. Double plays like crazy when Freeland was on the mound, hitting the ball on the ground, swinging at the first pitch, trying to ambush and then grounding out and killing some rallies. I can't tell you how many times I saw runners first and second, 1 or less outs, and then boom, ground ball, inning over, or a double play that pushes the runner to third with 2 outs, and you can't bring that runner in. That's the part that's really, really hard to watch as a fan. But the adage is, would you rather have the opportunities and not score on them than not have them at all? I guess that's really where we are right now after this series.
Yeah, and so you like that they're putting ducks on the pond and putting themselves in position, but then is it, and look, I don't know if you isolate it. Well, it's the young players that are taking a poor approach because they're first pitch swinging and they don't really know what they're going up there looking to do, because they're they ground into that double play instead of put together the productive at bat that, if they need a ball in the air, they get it, or if they need to hit the ball to the right side, they get it. And those sorts of things not happening. They need to work count. They do it. Those sorts of things. That's where I kind of say you go into almost that autopilot or go through the motions a little bit, where it's like, is the thought process of each at bat everything that it needs to be? Doesn't mean you're not trying or putting effort, but if you're not 100% with that approach of the situational baseball aspect of it, that is akin, in my opinion, to giving away an at bat, and it can happen from time to time. And if it becomes a pervasive mindset throughout a team that you're not getting every little inch from that AB, and it stacks on each other, and you start to see a game where you go, 1 for whatever with runners in scoring position, or you leave some opportunities on the table that end up being the difference in the game. And that's where, you could hit a ball hard, but you could hit it on the ground where you needed a different plate approach. Those sorts of things are absolutely real. The degree to which it's young players to blame for that or to attribute to that is, I guess it's going to be different from game to game, because yes, it's a young team. They've got a young core, but they've also got veteran players that can step into some of those spots as well. And a lack of execution, I think, is going to be something that happens across the board, regardless of your age or experience level. And clearly the Cardinals just didn't execute well enough in the Rockies series. And they've had probably too many instances throughout the season where that's been true. If the standard is we're going to be a playoff team this year, they're falling short of that on a regular basis enough that right now they're just a 500 team. Again, it can happen once or twice. It can happen here and there. But overall, you're a 500 club because that's what your record is dictating you are after 122 games or whatever it's been. And the calendar is beginning to dwindle to where you can't afford too many more of those instances, Or at the end of 162, that's just the team you were. There's nowhere to hide from it anymore with expected stats or with anything of that ilk. It's just what it is.
I agree with your point, Brenden. And the good news here is that the Cardinals are 4 games back of the final wild card spot. The bad news is they could have been a lot closer. And you welcome the Yankees to town, expected to be a packed crowd on Friday night. Luis Gil versus Andre Pallante. Now, Pallante is a subject that I think we need to talk about in and of itself. He has not been able to go deep into games. He's given up a lot of loud contact, has not found that breaking ball like he had a lot more control of last year. What does he need to prove, if anything, tomorrow against the Yankees?
It feels very similar to me with how we've kind of looked at Miles Mikolas. Michaels will have games where he's just not competitive. Cardinals have no chance to win. And then he pitches like he did earlier this week, where you go, man, that's the version of him that you need. And it's almost like it turns on a dime. For Pallante, we know that sometimes he sprinkles in walks where you don't want him, but just you mentioned the breaking ball. I think that's something that when he doesn't have it, he's got a limited scope, especially in what he's able to do against right-handed batters and the ways that he's going to attack them. And so he's got to have the consistency of his arsenal a little bit more. But I mean, you can look at the game log and say, man, he gives up 7 runs, 5 shutout performance against the Marlins. Really solid effort against a good Padres lineup where he keeps you in it for 5 innings and 2 runs. And then you have the Cubs game where he had no chance. He had no hope. And that was a lineup, I think, particularly constructed to get to him. Michael Busch had hit him hard. There were some others in that lineup who had done well against him historically. And a couple times through the lineup later, he's not facing even Ian Happ for a second time, I think it was. Like, it unraveled on him very quickly. You've got to be able to hang in there and find ways to get outs with less than your best stuff. And I just don't know if he's at a point right now where that is something that you can expect from him. We'll see. The Yankees are no slouch either, though, when it comes to having a pretty tough lineup. I don't know offhand what the historical data is, if he's faced these guys or how much, but it's going to be a grind if the stuff is not improved compared to what it was against the Cubs a few days ago for Pallante.
And there is a bit of a window for the Cardinals. It was a much bigger window before the Rockies series started, but here's how they will finish up the month of August. They will play the Yankees for 3 at Miami, who have played better baseball, but the Cardinals weren't too fazed by them. The Rays, who have struggled a bit. 4 against Pittsburgh at home. That's a big series to look at. 2 against Cincinnati. And then you have the Athletics, Giants, Mariners, Brewers, Reds, Brewers, Giants, Cubs to close out the season. So September is going to be a bit of a gauntlet, seeing the Brewers twice and seeing the Cubs one more time at Wrigley. I mean, it's not impossible, but you feel like they need to be 6 or 7 games above 500 over the rest of the way in order to get into that final wild card spot.
And there's not, to me, until you're getting to like 4 or 5 above 500, there's not a conversation to be had. The standings are what they are, but they don't really faze me much until I see from this team that it's of the caliber that it can do against that September schedule, what it's going to need to do to be able to get to that type of positioning. The Mets are losing a bunch of games now. Guess what? If the Mets end up going 79 and 83, somebody else is taking their spot, right? It's not going to happen by virtue of the Cardinals just being handed a wild card with 82 wins. The Reds are ahead still. There's not a lot of other teams ahead, which is one of the reasons that you can kind of dream on the playoff stuff still a little bit. But if the Cardinals finish with 81 wins, they're not going to get there. They're going to need to win, 85, 86, 87 games. And right now, we just have not consistently seen a version of this team that's going to be able to get there, because they'll take those 2 steps forward, but then it's 1 or 2 or 3 steps back. And being consistent over more than a week is going to be what is required the rest of the way. And when they show more proof of concept, I think fans would start to buy back in. But as of today, there's nothing that we have seen consistently that demonstrates it's going to be any different. If you ask me today what the final win total, 81, 82. That's kind of where I'm at, because it's kind of what they've shown to have been. If they find a consistent streak that goes longer than 2 series and then laying an egg in the third one, like happened over the past 10 days, then maybe we have a different conversation. But for now, I don't care what the standings are. I want to see you win the series that you're playing and then do it again and then do it again. And then maybe 3 weeks down the road, I look at the standings and say, you know what? We are still in this thing. And that's the way that I think it should be approached.
I really like that analysis, Brenden. And again, this team certainly has had their fair share of adversity this season. They've had guys that have been hurt. They have moved pieces. And I think that's what makes it a little bit easier for me, is because they showed their hand as sellers at the deadline. The game plan is development for the future. Now, because of the Mets' struggles, we've started to buy back in a little bit more. We'll always be fans of the team, always be supportive of the team, but also temper our expectations of what we think this team can accomplish. If they get into the playoffs, great. Do we think this team right now, as it's currently constructed, is set to win the World Series? I think the answer is pretty clear, no. Because if it was, they wouldn't have sold at the deadline. They would have bought. So I'd love to see them make a run at it. I'd love to see them make it very interesting. If not, I'd love to see who gets called up in September to get their feet wet in the big leagues. As Scott says here, hope we see JJ in September. It would excite the fans. I think there are other guys that will probably get the call before JJ just because there are more positions that have less crowding than where JJ would be. But there are a lot of things to look forward to. And certainly the fact that this team is scuffling but still competing as it is currently constructed gets me excited for the future.
Yeah, and I will say, though, if we're going to talk about this is about development and things of that ilk, it's going to be interesting. When Arenado comes back, I assume he's playing every day. Okay, that's a reasonable thing to do. That's not what you do if it's about development, though. So, like, continuing to straddle that line and how they approach that, if I'm Ollie Marmol, that's probably what I do because I'm trying to win as many games as possible and make the playoffs and demonstrate that, look at what I've done with a roster that was less than the best that we could put forward. That would be a great, feather in his cap. And so, yeah, I think Arenado's defense at third base should probably bat 7th or 8th, but he gives you the best chance to win. If that ends up happening as Arenado gets back to strength and returns, that's okay. It's just not development only. And so that's how you look at it as the coaching staff, how they look at it from up above. It's a mixture of like, yes, they probably would like to see development, but then you have to go, well, who is up above? Because the guy that's there now is going to be the guy that's there in a month. And so it completely changes the perspective on the way that is viewed. And for John Mozeliak to, make the comments recently about JJ, Quinn Matthews was asked on 101 ESPN, what would it look like? Is there value to bringing these guys up? That would be of the development ilk. Get a cup of coffee for some players if they're ready. But his response wasn't, well, if they're ready, we'll consider that. It was, it's not their protection year from the 40-man roster. That's completely ridiculous. Their protection year shouldn't have anything to do with anything. This is not necessarily a 40-man roster teaming with guys you just can't possibly afford to put onto waivers and risk losing, right? I'm not going to name names, but there would be an opportunity for some maneuvering with the 40-man roster, even knowing there's a lot of guys they do have to protect this coming off season. I just feel like they're still kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit and stuck in between on, are we developing? Are we evaluating for the rest of the season? Or are we trying to win? The way that gets jumbled out and who is kind of making those decisions will be very interesting to monitor, and the direction that it ends up playing out, I'm eager to see.
And it's a very difficult thing to try and manage, right? Trying to hold all the cards at once is not realistic in any game. There are some players right now that you might be holding on to a little too long. And because of that, it's impacting your ability to get other young players up and contributing within the organization. Now, I don't want to see the Dylan Carlson story play out again, but there are certainly some players on this roster right now that are resemblant of that. They've shown at least a good amount what they can do at the major league level, and they are major league quality players, there's no question, but they're not major league quality enough to make you understand when the question is asked, could somebody else do a better job? That the answer is not an immediate, no, this guy needs to be here constantly. We know that for fact. We know that for certain. So there are a lot of stones being left unturned, and to no fault of really anyone. It's just sort of the way the roster is constructed with the youth of this team. It just would excite me to see some different personalities, some refreshing pieces come in and to maybe change things as the culture starts to shift back to the way that things used to be in St. Louis.
Yeah, we'll see. And that's obviously the goal. I think it's everybody's stated goal. And the way to go about doing that is going to take some time, but it's also one of those things that if you're seeing consistent direction with it, I think fan base gets on board with that a lot quicker than if it's still kind of aimlessly wandering about and you're not sure exactly the way that they're going. Maybe the next 6 weeks or so are going to dictate a little bit more about that direction. And if not, the offseason does it. But we'll be watching and commenting and analyzing as it goes, as always, here on STL Sports Central.
Yes, we will. We certainly will be. And again, not to play devil's advocate, but let's just take a look at how things could shake out for 2026. Your infield, Contreras, Gorman, Donovan, Sajaci, Weatherholt, Arenado, that you have pieces that are certainly in the conversation, but that's a lot of mouths to feed that need regular playing time. We've seen what Sajaci's been able to do with regular playing time. How does he fit into the mix? How does Weatherholt fit into the mix? It's certainly a problem that I am not envious of having to solve if I'm Chaim Bloom or John Mozeliak, and we will see how they address that. Now, the final order of business is the Yankees. That is tomorrow. First pitch is set to begin at 7:15 Central at Busch Stadium. It's going to be a packed house, you can imagine, with the boys in the pinstripes coming into town. I think if you go and you win this series against the Yankees, it can establish a bit of confidence for this team.
I think it could. I think I would continue to wait. I would say, hey, nice series win. And then we could go, okay, you got to do it 2 or 3 more times to make up for what happened against Colorado. That's the reality of it. It's unfortunate, but I like you would think, yes, the series win over the Yankees should establish confidence. Thought that about the Dodgers-Cubs week. That was great. But then where's the momentum go after that? You got to continue to do it. You got to continue to do it the rest of the way, and they can't really afford many lapses if they're going to make a charge at this point.
Right, you are, Brenden. Thanks so much for joining us as always. Thank you to everybody who got involved in the conversation. I know it was a frustrating series, but again, it is so awesome getting to follow this organization, getting to follow this team and the great baseball history. The 2 most World Series combined out of any 2 franchises in baseball will meet up between the arches at Busch Stadium. I cannot wait to see how the Cardinals respond after a very tough series against the Rockies. For everyone here at STL Sports Central, for Brenden Schaeffer, I'm Stefan Caray signing off. Let's see if the Cardinals can get back on track against the boys from New York.